if you're able to decide when you want to go someplace and what state you want to go there in, and have that state at your own discretion, in what way does that actually mean you are more in control than if you had to go up 10 minutes, down 10 minutes, up 10 minutes, down, up 10 minutes, down, and we draw this out again, all the way to wherever your destination is. And then that's when the smoke out of the ears response started happening. And again, this was another one of those real immediate, sudden ones where we got all of those really strong physiological shifts all at once. And I didn't interrupt him. I just let him stay there for a while until he was done. And then when he was done, I asked him to think about what it was like to fly. And he said, well, it seems okay now. No, I'm not sure if it really would be if I got on a plane. And yet earlier when I'd asked him that same question, he turned white. He turned white. That's the importance of pre-testing, so that you know what your access is ahead of time. And I saw a very different response after that. So that's example number 2. Ready for example number 3? All right. This was a man, he had a private appointment, and when he was scheduled to arrive, he was there, and he was out in his car. And he sat there for about 10 minutes, and I'd walked in the kitchen, and I noticed that his car was there. And I thought, oh, he'll be at the door any second, but he didn't come. So I kind of looked out again, and he was sitting there in the car, and he looked like he was going like that. He looked like, if you'll forgive me for mind reading for one moment, like a state of really intense panic or terror or something like that. So this got me curious. And finally, after about 10 minutes, he did come to the door. I was wondering if I was going to have to go out and get him. But he came to the door. He had this bag with him, full of something, and he carried that in. And we went downstairs where I usually do my private sessions. And so I said, oh, well, what is it that you want? And he said, well, he was still in a bit of this state. He said, I'm always preoccupied with something. Now, I recognized the meta-model violation. So I asked him, what thing specifically? And what is it that you're preoccupied with? And he said, this body part. I'm always thinking about this body part. And so I asked him a few more questions. I thought I'd stop there. I recognized it still wasn't being specific, but I figured I better not ask which one specifically anymore. And so I asked, well, how's this a problem? Well, anything I do, I keep thinking of this body part. And it's an obsession, I just have to think about it all the time. And it keeps me from doing things and so on. So now I had my own hallucinations about what body part it might be, but I didn't say them. Now, as we started talking more and going into more information gathering, and I was, again, utilizing language patterns. And at some point, I'm not sure when it was, all of a sudden I just found that the word came out, and I realized I had not intended this, but it was nose. It was his nose. And somehow I got that it was his nose, and I just said it, and as soon as the word came out, though, I was horrified, thinking I violated some major prohibition. But I noticed he was cool with it, so I just kept on using the N-word, and he accepted that. So we both started using it. And so the whole thing was that he was preoccupied with his nose. It turned out how this had started was that when he was young, something like 9 years old, he had this experience where he was playing catch with somebody in his family, his dad or a brother, and so they must have played hardball there, because he got the ball in his nose, and it broke his nose. Blood came gushing out of his nose, and you can imagine what a 9-year-old child might think of this experience. That's pretty traumatic to see all that red stuff coming out. And his father took this moment, recognizing that he was traumatized and easily hypnotizable in that state, to give him an unuseful presupposition. So he said something about, oh no, now your whole life is ruined because your nose is screwed up. Or at least that's the way he interpreted it, whatever his dad actually said. And my assumption is his dad, who knows what was going on for his father, he was probably deeply concerned for his child. And yet what came out was something that went in as it probably would have for most people, as a hypnotic command. And he got that. Oh, my life is ruined because of my nose. And he believed that at an unconscious level. So as he went on, as we kept talking about this, let's see if I can remember what was that the early questions were. Never mind. Well, I started doing some early language patterns. None of those worked. So finally we got to a certain state where the whole belief seemed to be my nose is not perfect. That means my life is screwed up. And what I said to him was, so in what way does your nose being imperfect actually mean that you're a more perfect human being than you would be had you a totally perfect nose? And he goes, that makes no sense to me. And so I repeated it a few times and said how that made sense to me. And he's inviting, I said, well, maybe there are these ways. And it didn't make any sense to him. So we kept going. And, I remember one of the things I used was counterexample. I said, well, my husband's nose is actually a lot more crooked than yours, and I married him, It's like, because one of the things was having a relationship. Didn't make any difference. And we kept on going for about 15 minutes, and finally he looked at me and he said, that thing that you said, it makes sense. And I said, what thing? Because we'd been talking a lot. I had not a clue. And he said, about how my nose being imperfect actually makes me a more perfect human being. And then he started telling me all the ways in which it made sense. And that was the key point of that session. That made the biggest difference. So, are you beginning to get the pattern? All right. So let me give you one and find out if you can run the same pattern with it. And here we go. This is another one that actually came up with someone. I have flaws. So since I have flaws, I'm not going to be able to have a relationship because at some point my flaws are going, my personal flaws are going to interfere and it's going to fall apart anyway. So since I have flaws, I'm not going to ever have a relationship. Okay, so flaws will cause no relationship. Now, how do we use this pattern with that? Yeah, go for it.
In what way do your flaws allow you to be more lovable?
Okay,
and understand?
Great. Anyone have another variation on it?
Which one of your flaws do you think is going to be the most attractive to another person?
Okay, now that's doing it and chunking it down, which can get a different response, slightly different. Anyone else want to? Okay, yeah, you got it. Let's do another example. Let's see. Let's take the one from yesterday. The fact that I don't have any degrees is going to cause me not to have the job I want.
So which meta job are you going to have?
Now, rather than which, go for the whole thing. Rather than chunking it down, go for the whole thing.
So how does your lack of degrees actually make you more employable?
Yes. Or how does the fact that you don't have any degrees, how will that actually enable you to more easily get the job that you truly want than if you'd gone through that track that you didn't really want to go on? Great. I think we've got it then. I think we're ready to go and practice. And since that time, I've noticed, after getting more pattern about this, that I've used this particular pattern that we call reverse presupposition with most of the time. I do it with myself. Any limiting belief I can think of, I run this on it. And it's fun for me. It's particularly interesting. Let me give you one more. This woman said if she had some illnesses, she needed to rest, she wasn't resting. Very serious illnesses, potentially life-threatening. And she wasn't resting, workaholic. So she's telling me, I need to rest, but, if I'd rest, I'd be lazy. So rest equals lazy. I should work hard, I shouldn't be lazy. How do we run this pattern?
How can taking rest periods make you even more productive than you would have been working full time?
Make you, yeah, that's real close. Now, with reversing presuppositions, to add a little bit of cognitive understanding to this, what we're going for is a total flip. It's different from a counterexample where you're looking for one exception, and that's why I was getting you don't chunk down, do the whole ball of wax. Counterexample, we're going, here's one example of where it doesn't hold up. With this, we're going, how is the whole thing actually the opposite of what you thought it was? That's really what we're saying here. Is how is this whole area actually the total opposite of what you thought it was?
How much work would you less?
So in what way is, yeah, I think you're on to the one that I utilized with her. I thought, this sounds really bizarre, but we'll see if it makes sense to her. I said, in what way is your resting actually harder work than if you were just to do what you've always done? When I said that at first, she goes, what? That doesn't make any sense. I don't know. What do you mean by that? I said, I don't know either. I was hoping you would know. And then the two of us kind of figured it out, though. As we talked about it a little bit more, we got it formulated into a way that fit for her. And that was that, well, if I rest, that actually is harder work, because working all the time is what I'm familiar with. It's my pattern. It's the easy thing. So resting is actually more of a stretch, therefore harder work for me than if I were to do what I've always done and what is easy for me. Does that make sense? There often is a way in which these things make sense when you stop to think about it. And I think what happens with reversing presuppositions, the pattern is A equals or causes B, and you go, in what way does, is, can, might, could, would, will, in what way, and this is in your notes somewhere too, and then you pick a verb form that fits. You go with might if you think that the person's not so likely to accept this. You go with will or is or does if you think you can get by with it and that it'll go in at that level. In what way does blah, A, actually mean or cause the opposite of B? Does that make sense as the form? So what happens when we do this is, I think about it this way. We have our beliefs. We come up with this conclusion. So let's say early in life, nobody paid much attention to me. I didn't get too much love and affection. So I concluded that I was not worthwhile. So I have this belief. I can find matches for that. I walk through life. I notice everything that fits it. So it's very easy almost any belief is very easy to maintain, because you can find evidence for anything if you look hard enough. So once you have a belief, you just go through life looking for fits. Now, what if I take the opposite belief and I just step into it for a moment and I look for fits for that? I can find fits. Now let's go through life and check for fits for I am worthwhile. Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense now that I think about it that way. I can find lots of fits. And this process gets us to resort that way. In what way does A, now that I think about it, actually mean cause the opposite of B? Sometimes you'll need to find out what the opposite of B is. And there would be a lot of ways to go after that same result. And what I'd like you guys to do now is to use this particular one to notice what happens when you use it in a fairly patterned way. Because this particular wording sequence tends to get the strongest, most powerful response. Sometimes you'll need a more in here. Sometimes you'll need a comparative. And sometimes you'll need to ask, what's the opposite of B? Because you want to use their words. I had heard her talk about working hard before. One woman said, Christmas is stressful.